much, Vicky. Thank you for that introduction, and also thank you for inviting me here. It's a privilege to come to this community and have you here to listen to what I have to say. So, yes, as Vicky said, I will talk to you a little bit about a few of the different activities that we have been doing. And maybe I share my screen. So yes, the talk today will be about bridging sensory gaps and innovations for inclusivity. And the different things that I want to talk about, I think inclusivity and inclusion is really related to power structures and societal structures that we have created. So I go to the background of that and start from there. And then we will talk a little bit about what is the role of technology in all of this and how can we utilize technology to bridge the gaps and make the world a little bit more inclusive. We look at a little bit about the different international treaties that talk about the need for equality. And then I tell you, so all of these are the background to how we started the center Include. So I tell you a little bit more about our center and how it relates to our different projects. So I go back many years to my PhD to talk about how different views come about, how we create, we come to agree. Because at the bottom, at the core of all of these inequalities and things are the norms that we have created. So for me, it was really interesting to see how we come to agree on something. What I was saying was that the systems or phenomena were being treated differently in different settings. So I was interested to find out why some things are seen one way in one setting and differently in another setting. And then I realized that there is the way that we organize our structures have something to do with it. But how do our norms come about? Why do we come to this type of settings? So as usual, I don't make things easy for myself. So for that study, I synthesized some different theoretical viewpoints. One of them was Giddens' structuration theory. And so what was interesting for me was that it refers to the conditions within which structures are shaped and reshaped, and hence the reproduction of social systems. So I wanted to understand, how do we form these social systems? He talks about duality of structure. So unlike the people who see dualisms in micro or action structure, he talks about duality of structure, that we form structures and the structures enable or disable our actions in this. So for him, social life is not the sum of its micro level activities, and nor is the social activity can explain everything, or we cannot describe everything from a micro level. He puts the focus on social practices which are ordered in space and time. So everything that we do maybe is governed by the structures that we have created, but we also, by doing things, we affect those structures. So we are all of the time shaping and reshaping them. So by performing their activities, actors draw upon the rules and resources that make up the structure, while at the same time, through performing these activities, those rules and resources are produced and reproduced. So the main point that I was taking away, and I like to connect to in this talk, is that activities contribute to reproduction of structures as well as being shaped by them. So because we have norms, it doesn't mean that they are divine and they are there to stay. We can actually affect them. And those norms, of course, restrict or enable our activities as well. So this is really important in the in our dealing with inclusion and the norms of equal opportunities for all. Another thing that I was looking at was Harry Collins and the creation and maintenance of conceptual order. So in science and technology studies, I'm not sure, I guess many of you are quite familiar with them. It's where he looks at how we form our views that we share among each other. So the conceptual order that we create, how does it come about? So he shifts the focus to sociological resolution. So again, not everything is a given. There is always, we as social beings, we are creating these things. So he looks at the sociological factors behind it. So the ways in which concerted perceptions and actions come about, he looks at that, and practices that are utilized to establish matters of facts. So we, for example, when we are looking at the norms and the way that we see, for example, disability, how have we established that view of disability? So how do we come by orderly ways of seeing, how we maintain them, how we develop new ones? And he talks about that our systems and system of beliefs is like a network that they are entrenched in each other, and they strengthen and work together. So he says that our concepts and social conventions reinforce each other as in a network, explaining that order is maintained and that both concepts and conventions are jointly entrenched within forms of life. So for example, the examples are like when we talk about grass is green, if you look at the grass, it's not really green, but they sort of reinforce each other. And the more we use them, the more they become accepted and reinforced. And another thing that is interesting to look at is that conceptual frameworks will never generate trouble spontaneously. So if we look at people who see people differently and place power in some hands and take it away from some other people, it's not likely that those type of things change from within the system. You often need to take a from outside view and rattle things and change them. So if we want the norms in society to change, and if we want inclusivity to become part of it, the system by itself, the people who have created these divisions are not likely to change them. We need to take action and change them and create new structures. And one more important thing that he talks about, and many people in science and technology studies talk about, is methodological symmetry. So I'm not sure if you are familiar with it, but for example, when we look at science, we say, okay, 1 + 1 is 2. That's a given. We know that that's true. So we don't need to look at why we accept that 1 + 1 is 2. But if in some system somebody came and said 1 + 1 is 3, that's very strange. Let's look at it and see why they are saying 1 + 1 is 3. The thing is, what they are saying is that you should not differentiate your methodology of studying the two phenomena of 1 + 1 is equal 2 and 1 + 1 is equal 3, because 1 + 1 has become 2 because it has become very familiar with us. We need to use the same methodology to study all of the phenomena in life. And in fact, when it comes to science, when you go to controversy studies and to very complex science, it's not a given that what we are taking as a accepted theory, that it's true. We need to look at all of these to see what it is that makes it acceptable to us as a true theory or not. So this is very important because, for example, when we look at disability, we say, okay, we who can see, of course, we don't need any help, but people who cannot see, they need help. If we use this symmetrical methodological symmetry and look at that phenomena, the thing is, when a person is born blind or a person is born with sight, their natural state is what they know. Now, through the years, we have created a world that makes everything easy for people who can see. So if you look around your room, why is this room designed the way it is? Why the windows are where they are? Why the views? Why they are facing the views that we can look at? Why do we have text or textual information, visual information to tell us things about the world? Why do we have hundreds of different types of lights for lighting and giving us clues about the washing machine being ready and things like that? We have created them. They didn't exist from the beginning. We have created all of these technologies to help people who can see, but we have not done the same for people who cannot see. It's not because they need help. It's because we have organized our society in a way that we privilege those people who see, but we don't give the same options to people who were born blind. So if we were to apply this methodological symmetry to looking at things, then we can see it's not that some people need extra help. We are not doing them a favor. We have done everyone a disfavor to privilege some and just prepare the world for some people, but not other people. Then a third theoretical aspect that I took in my study was Nils Brunsson, which is a Swedish theorist in organizational theory and decision making. And again, his view is not, he also adopts a critical perspective and questions the from within perspective, because in decision theory, they often think that you go through a decision process to come to a choice. So choice and decisions are usually used synonymously. But what he does is that he looks at it from outside and he actually finds that decision and choice do not have to go hand in hand. He asks a lot of questions that normal decision theory people have not asked. For example, who are allowed and willing to act as decision makers? Or what are the effects of decisions? And decisions don't necessarily have to lead to a choice. In fact, sometimes decision process, we go through it just to legitimize the final outcome that we want to reach at. Sometimes we go through the decision process because we want to create a team. Sometimes we go through the decision process because we want people to think that they own the decision. So this is not the type of things that have been always taken for granted, that we are going to the decision process to come to the optimal choice. That's not the case. There are a lot of other things that come into it. And in fact, something that Brunsson brings up and shows is that talk, decision, and action that usually in traditional systems or theories have been taken together, he separates them. And he says sometimes, especially in politics, you can see that people have different followers and they want to please everyone. So they talk in a certain way to please a certain number of the population. Then they make a decision that doesn't really go with the talk that they just had to please some other people. And then when they take the actions, it's totally different action that doesn't fit the talk or the decision. And it's just to please some other people. So really, talk, decision, and action don't have to go together. And the same comes into it when we look at inclusion and our societal norms. We often feel that, I often see that in writing and in words, they say, yes, we need to have equality and equal opportunities for all. But when it comes to actual decisions or actions, then they are overlooked, and then it becomes a problem. And so all of these things have to go hand in hand to make this world a little bit more inclusive. So in my study, I actually did it over a long period of time. I had 4 very long cases. I did a lot of interviews and a lot of observations and different countries. I wasn't sure in the beginning that I actually can come up with something, but I was so surprised with the rich data that was found. And in these studies, I found that in every step of the way in decision making, you can manipulate the situation. I found so many different mechanisms of control that people actually don't know, the ways that people get manipulated into making a decision. Like, for example, in one of the cases, they wanted to centralize several different universities that were working autonomously. And they told me that if we said that we want to centralize you, they all will protest and it becomes a big major thing. So the way that they were planning to bring them together was that they were going to, they said centralization is not the term to be used. If we say partnership, that's a good word to use. People like partnership, so they come together and become partners. Then, for example, they started changing their systems, and they started with their library management system. And libraries usually work together, so they started choosing a library management system that centralized the work between the different libraries. And by having this centralized system, then they had to centralize their work, their way of working with these different libraries and ordering and purchasing. So all of this was a conscious decision to make them choose this library management system. So through a process of maybe 1 year or more, every meeting, every step was orchestrated to make this final decision to become this particular system. And it fits very well with what I saw what they were doing fitted very well with what Collins has said, that, for example, perceptions and actions are formed and come about in such an unthinking is that their formation hardly looks an achievement at all. So what I was saying was that, I give you an example, like they knew who are the people who would like this system. They went and talked to these people in one of the cases, and they said, we are going to choose a libraries management system, and we need a committee to work on it. And I think it would be really great to work on that committee. Keep an eye on it if it comes up. And then when they had a broad meeting from all of these universities, they said, oh, we are going to have a committee to choose a library management system. Is there any volunteer who wants to be part of that committee? And of course, the people who they had talked to, they said me and a few other people. But for the other people, they went and talked, oh, I have this other project for you. Maybe it's too much work. Work on that one. So they got the right people to be part of this committee. That's only one example of hundreds of tiny little manipulation or changing of to get that system chosen. And in the end, it was chosen, and everyone thought it was a very democratic system, and it was their own choice, and they were participant in it. So I give you an example of something that one of the main directors was telling me. He was saying that he controls all of these meetings and you can achieve what you want. And his words were this, that the chair of a meeting often has an idea of the conclusion that he or she wants out of the meeting. You can influence it by the way in which you ask people to speak. You can invite certain people to speak in a certain order. I mean, you know, not necessarily being particularly manipulative. A lot of this is subconscious stuff, isn't it? But it's often very difficult to go against the chair of a meeting. Chairs got too much, you know, too much weaponry. And I could see evidence of this in every little meeting that I was observing. So I found, and also he was saying that when something doesn't work, then they would use technology to drive the change, or they would throw money at it and lubricate the change. And you can see this in the whole of the society, how different the systems work and how different um, people get their own agenda across. So I found a lot of mechanism of control in that study, and I could see that they are at different level: organizational, technical, documentary, and social. And I have hundreds of different examples of this, but at the end of my study, I didn't know what to do with all of this, because if I wrote a book about all of these different mechanisms of control and how you can control things, I would create one more weapon in the hand of people who already have the power. And the people that I wanted to know about this, the ordinary people that I don't want to be manipulated, wouldn't have the time or energy to go and read this a scholarly book of many pages to see how they should react or to recognize these things. So I was at a loss what to do with my PhD and what can I look at. So when it became to my postdoc, I was looking at different technologies and how they can be used in different movements or changing things. We created a research program called Social Media Studies, and we were working on that. But of course, through that studies, we realized that there are floodways of new thoughts and systems coming up. This was early 2000, maybe 2000, yeah, 2000. And I think a lot of social media came early 2000 and things, but after my PhD, then I started looking at them. So disruptive technologies that change long-established societal structures. And you know examples of this, and now they are very known. At the time, they were quite new, like, for example, how people take their mobile cameras and document things and become some kind of journalists, or how, for example, educational system that has been established in years and years is being changed, and all of these online courses and YouTube courses, people can learn things. And so things where these technologies had the power to sort of question or rattle these established institutionalized systems. But what became interesting for me was how marginalized groups can find and connect with each other beyond the geographical boundaries, and also how affinity groups can be formed or activism can be organized. So that brings us to the question of, for example, what is the norm? And we often say that we have systems for the majority, and that's economy that decides that we should have systems for everyone. But for tiny little problems, it's too costly to create some system for people that form a tiny little percent of the society. If we collect and we use technology to bring all of those people together, then they become a force, and they don't become one person in 100 in a situation long away, but all of them together become a group of people that we can reckon with. So following that, I was very concerned about societal norms and asymmetrical power structures, and the bias from frameworks and systems and inadequate designs that privilege some and exclude others. But of course, there is a broad diversity in the society, and we have all different needs. And because of that, we need to adopt this type of critical perspectives that I mentioned earlier on, to look at these different causes and effects of these different equal treatments. So look at values, actions, or structures that lead to these unequal treatments of societal members, and based on the ideology of norm, the normal. What is the normal? So yes, I actually don't know what is the world designed for. Often one talks about a male, white male between a certain age, and I actually don't know what the age group is. But even if we look at the age group of that group, many people, male people, fall beyond that age group. But also 50% of the whole society is female. And then we all have different conditions and abilities and circumstances and backgrounds. So when we talk about that we create something to fit the majority and that's value for money, what is this majority? How do we design our system? What is that norm that we are designing things for? And if we look at, for example, just issues of disability, many of us don't fit into this norm. There are reports that, for example, World Bank estimates the number of people with disability to be 15% of the world population. WHO, they estimate it to be 16%. The report by World Bank says of the 15%, 5% of people with disability, their condition is so severe that it creates a lot of barriers for their everyday life. So if we look at just disability, but not look at the physical differences between people, but look at the social conditions at the root of such attributes becoming a differentiating factor in how people are treated, then we are in a good way. We are looking at how we can actually change the system and create a more inclusive society. So that started giving the idea to the project that Vicky mentioned. We actually call it Suitcase, even though we spell it slightly differently because Suitcase was already taken and we didn't have time to explore our options. But the idea for that was based on all of these different treaties, international treaties like Universal Declaration of Human Rights or the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, which is also all of them reflected in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. And based on all of this, we need to create a world that offers equal opportunity for all. It includes information, communication systems, cultural environments, access to everything. So we need to make our systems, our world, accessible for everyone. So talking about these different technologies and Internet of Things or machine learning and things that were emerging at the time, we were thinking that, okay, we have this world. It has many different aspects and settings into it. Then we have Internet of Things that makes possible for us to identify different things and give them identification, and they can start talking to each other. Then we have many different objects and things around us. We have a lot of text. We have a lot of social media. If we could bring them all together in a wearable, in a clothing that could capture all of this information and then communicate that information with the person who wears them, then that person, even if the person lives with deafblindness, they could interact with the world the same as some other people. So we have created possibility for everyone else to interact with this world. Now with this solution, we could enable people with deafblindness to also do that. And also, Yes, deafblindness was a good use case because we have a lot of systems for people who have visual impairment. We have a lot of systems for people who are hard of hearing. But if you have multiple conditions like deafblindness, which is both of these things, then we don't have systems for them. We solve a tiny little problem, but we don't go to the bigger picture. So this project Suitcase then started with the idea of improving the level of independence and participations of people with deafblindness. And we decided to address 3 different challenges. One was perception of the environment, how to capture environmental clues, where is my desk, where is my coffee, what are the obstacles in my way, and things like that. So capture on that information with computer vision and different algorithms and know what is around them. So we had object, face, and scene detection and recognition. So once we know that, for example, you are placed in a kitchen and you have a couple of plates on the table in front of you, how do we then communicate that to the person with deafblindness? So we then looked at the different communication systems that they are using already, like tactile sign language and social haptic communication, which is you draw some images with your hand, touch messages on the body of the person with deafblindness to convey different messages to them. So we thought then we can emulate those signs through actuators and through this wearable to haptically give them the same information that the hand would give them. So we would take the information from the environment, convert it to this, what we call haptograms, and then convey the information to the person through haptic signals. We also had a third challenge to create game. We added gamification for different purposes because we wanted it to become easy to learn and also to create some fun for people with deafblindness, and also maybe for it to become a useful tool for education for children. But based on that, we became 7 different organizations from 7 different countries, and together we were tackling different parts of this system or what we were doing. Like, for example, colleagues from University of Leeds were working with sensor technologies and navigation issues. We were working with, for example, emulating sign languages, but colleagues in Eindhoven, they work with haptics and perception, so they would look at, does the body actually perceive the messages that we are giving to it the way we intend to do? So it became a really nice project, and we all formed a very good relationship, and it felt like working with the family group. And that led us to some thoughts to continue after that project, because we felt the work is not completed. We created some prototypes, but needs to be going on. But we also enjoyed each other's company so much that we wanted to continue our working together. And also in that project, we had created a huge network of contacts with all of the organizations that work with deafblindness, with a lot of people, colleagues with deafblindness, with a lot of insights that they brought to the project. We created an advisory group that became participant in the project. And we also had come up with very strong results. We created many different prototypes. And in fact, we were invited to compete for the Innovation Radar Prize. And out of the 200 projects that were invited, we were one of the 8 shortlisted in the health category. And of course, we were competing with people solving maybe cancer and other health issues. So we didn't, of course, win, but just to come to that was really interesting. But the different attention that we received told us two things. One was, of course, that we are doing a good job. It's a good quality work. But the other thing was that there must be a gap in this area, because if we were competing with lots of other people working with the same things, we wouldn't have had as much attention as we received in that project. So we knew that this work needs to continue because there isn't enough out there. And also in our final review, we had our project officer with us, and in fact, the EU asked, or the Commission asked us for the extensive policy study that our colleagues at Leeds led, and they wanted that for their internal information and decisions. And one of a comment that our PO had was that it would have been nice if you created a center of excellence that we could collaborate in future for this type of work, and you could continue this work. And that stayed with us, and we tried to create something together and call it Include, and create a center to continue this type of studies. So that's how Include came about. In Include, we do the same things as every university does, or we do research, we try to develop things and deploy them and transfer them to other areas. And we cover all of the different aspects so it's not just making connection with the outside world. It does involve education, research, partnership, and societal impact. So all of these are our ambitions, but how much we will do, we will see. And we had different ideas for this center. So we wanted to reach research excellence. We wanted it to be multidisciplinary. We already have started different labs. We wanted to bring them together and collaborate on different aspects. We, of course, initiated it at HP, and of course, my department was good enough to give me a little time to put into creating this. But the idea is not that it's a HP-based, HP is University of Borås. It's not an H just for HP, it's an international collaboration, and we just facilitate. So we want Include to be an international network. We also have been successful and continue to look at different external fundings to create funding for different projects and activities. We, of course, want to achieve societal impact and make a change in the bringing about equal opportunities for all, and also raise awareness and change people's attitudes. And we, of course, have some performance measurements to make sure that we are doing things as we are supposed to be doing. So one of the things that came out of our collaboration, or following the suitcase and ambitions of Include, has been to create a project called Muse IT, which is in the area of cultural heritage. And it's a Horizon Europe project. It's a 3-year project that started last year, October of last year, and it will continue for 2 more years until September of 2025. And we are 12 partners. We are 9 beneficiaries and 3 associated partners, because they are not situated in the European Union. So Stanford University is in the US, and King's College and X-System are in the UK. And in this project, we address 3 different challenges. The first one is to broaden accessibility of cultural assets for everyone. So in Suitcase, we looked at specifically people with deafblindness and created technologies for that group. Here we are saying that we are not going to create something for a specific group. We want everything to be accessible by everyone based on their own needs and preferences and abilities. So for the same object, we are trying to create multisensory representations and alternative expressions. So for example, a painting could be visually accessible, but we can also have narratives about it by different voices, by different people. We could represent it in some haptic format. We could perhaps get some musicians to create music that aesthetically represents their feeling of this painting. So the person who cannot see or cannot hear or cannot come to the museum, they can also have interact with this particular object in the ways that suits their own abilities. So yes, we want to create multiple representations of the same object, many layers. We also want to create alternative expressions. So for example, a fashion, which is a visual art, we want to go beyond that and create other dimensions to it. And in fact, if there is a piece of, for example, fashion, which is a visual art, we want to create maybe sonifications and other sounds that aesthetically can be a representative for that. So a person who cannot see can perhaps feel and experience it in a different way. We also are going to create a user experience environment that allows the user to interact with this object in different ways, whether it's haptic or AR, VR, and other forms. The second challenge that we are going to address is, or we are addressing, is to create broader engagement or platforms that enables broader engagement. So if you cannot, for example, physically all be together to perform, you might use Zoom to perform dance and have big screens and be participating. But we find that, for example, to create and co-perform music is very challenging because music needs to be really tight and you cannot do it just this from distance via Zoom. So we want to create a system that takes away the latency and enables co-performance from distance, but in the right way properly. And in fact, we are building on technology that Stanford University has created called JackTrip, which you can see examples of here that people, different musicians from distance are actually co-performing and co-creating music without latency. And the third challenge that we are addressing is to create an inclusive repository of cultural assets. And by this, we have 4 different ambitions. So first of all, we want the repositories to be accessible. So the information that is there to be accessible to all. Many of our systems and databases and things don't have that right now, but they are trying. So that's our first ambition. But the second thing is that because of all the barriers that we have created, many of the arts and cultural assets that are created by people with disability don't actually make it to come to these different storages of cultural asset because they are barrier after barrier after barrier. So we want to have this storage, this the repository that includes cultural asset by everyone, so it's inclusive in that way. But by doing that, and since we are creating multisensory representations and multimodal representations, there are some methodological things that need to be solved. How to make all of these different dimensions to be recognized as part of the same thing and be represented when we are accessing them. And also, when it comes, for example, to haptics or social emotions and things, how do we store them? So there aren't enough knowledge about metadata and other types of storage things that we are working. So 4 levels of things that we are doing. And then we are also extending this to our other work. Like, for example, we are part of a huge project called Sylvanus, which has a budget of 25 million euros. And it's not really at all about inclusion and things. It's about creating a climate resistant, a resilient forest management platform to stop the spread of wildfires. So it's a Green Deal type of a project. But in that project, we have task for citizen engagement. And citizen engagement, in fact, in wildfires, statistics show that between 60 to 90% of all of these wildfires are created because of human factor. And how do we raise awareness that for people to not take actions that lead to these wildfires? So that's very important to have this citizen engagement. But okay, citizens, we are everyone and we are all different. How do we communicate all of this information to everyone? So how do we raise awareness in a way that everyone gets access to it? So, and also once they are in this middle of a fire, how do we inform everyone that there is a danger going on? So if you are a person with deafblindness and cannot see the news or hear the radio, how do we communicate this danger to them at that time? So this inclusive information, crisis information becomes very important here. Of our very most latest activities that we have formed a group of interested people, and we have created a proposal called Diverse that we have just submitted for Marie Curie. And that's our intention to create new generation of researchers that follow up on all these topics. And we are a big consortium again. And of course, if we do get funded, it will be 15 new PhDs that are working with this. But we have really looked at this as a learning exercise to see how to write this type of applications, and then we can work more on it and create new applications for that. But by all of this, we are actually addressing this main sustainable development goal of reduced inequalities. So in all of these actions, we are working on that. But by doing that, we are actually affecting many of these other goals, like no poverty or zero hunger or good health. Because if we make the society more equal, we create opportunities for all of these other challenges to be also solved. I actually don't have, we have a lot of people involved in Include. These are just some of the colleagues that I quickly contacted them and I said, is it okay that I mention you in this? And they said, fine. But there are quite a few more because I didn't have their permission. I didn't put their things here. But anyway, we are a large group of, we are not a large group, we are a small group, but very enthusiastic group. We are around, I don't know, 50, 60 people. And we are very open to collaborate with more people, and you are very welcome to join us. And we do a lot of nice things. Beside all of the research and other things that we are doing, we also do a lot of different activities like organizing events, and this is our latest events, and some of the colleagues here would have been in it, and we were quite a few people from 17 different countries that came together, and it was called Haptics for Inclusion, and they all brought their research about haptics, and we sort of looked at each other and got inspired, and yes, we do this type of things. And these are some references to Giddens and Collins and Brunson. And here are some links that if you want to look at any of the projects that I mentioned, you can follow up. And thank you very much for listening to me. And I stop sharing now.